The most exciting episode of the year is upon us. The top 25 heavy metal albums of 2025. Next. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to another episode of the Metal Dude Buys. As you are aware, this channel is dedicated to discovering and identifying the best heavy metal in the history of heavy metal. And as you can see by the calendar on the wall, 2025 is just about history. So it's time for your favorite metal historian to come into the current year and tell you all about the great heavy metal of 2025. Now, before we get started, I just want to say three things. Number one, if you're a supporter of this channel, thank you. It has been a blast. This is the third time I've done this episode, and I really love it. Number two, if you are someone who loves heavy metal, put your top 5, your top 10, your top 20 list in the comments below. You would be amazed at how many great bands, great albums, and great songs that I've been turned on to because of suggestions from you. Believe it or not, I don't do this professionally. I have a full-time job. I have a full-time family. So just because it's not on the list doesn't mean I don't like it. It may mean I have never heard it. So put your list down below. I appreciate that. And finally, I do want to also say that 2025 was a sensational year for heavy metal. I could have easily put together the top 40 or 50 albums of the year without breaking a sweat. So if you don't see your band on this list, doesn't mean I didn't like the album. It just means there just wasn't enough room. With all that being said, let's get to the list. Let's start off with number 25. Coming in at number 25, let's start with a little metalcore. Bleeding Through, with their 9th studio album, unoriginally titled 9. This album came out in February. But actually, I started hearing about this album way back in 2024. In fact, one of the songs that is on that album was on my best songs of the year of 2024 before I knew there was going to be an album. That song, and my favorite song on this album, Path of Our Disease, is an absolute banger. But there's also great songs as well. Our Brand is Chaos, Dead But So Alive. This album was under serious consideration for the best metalcore album of the year, and Path of Our Disease is in the running for best metalcore song of the year as well. This is an absolute great song and a bit of a comeback for Bleeding Through. And there's a bit of a theme that's going to run through this entire list. A lot of bands making big comebacks in 2025. Speaking of comebacks, coming in at number 24, Dream Theater, with their album Parasomnia, their 16th studio album. These progressive juggernauts have put together one of the best albums in recent memory. Now, the reason I say this is a bit of a comeback primarily is because this is the big comeback of drummer Mike Portnoy. Mike Portnoy, one of the best drummers in the history of heavy metal, returns to Dream Theater, and it really seems to reinvigorate the band. The band really seemed to put more emphasis on great songwriting, great storytelling, great song craftsmanship, and it really paid off. One of their songs, Night Terror, was nominated for a Grammy. And a deep track that I really like is a song called Dead Asleep. This is a song about a murder mystery about someone who is a suspect for murder who may have committed that murder while walking in their sleep. That's what I mean by the great song writing and craftsmanship of Dream Theater. Check out this song, check out the lyrics. What a cool story. And the whole album seems to be a concept related around sleep terrors. So I think this is the best Dream Theater album in decades. Welcome back, Mike Portnoy. Coming in at number 23, Amorphis with their album Borderland. This is their 15th studio album. This was released back in September. If you're not familiar with Amorphis, they are a Finnish melodic death metal band that mixes in progressive rock and even a little bit of folk metal. It's a really cool blend. They put together some really great songs. The first song, the single that they released, is a song called Light and Shadow. I really like this song. It really whet my appetite for this album. It is one of the best songs of the year. But once the album came out, I ran into so many other great songs of this album. Bones might be the heaviest. It has a great heavy riff. Dancing Shadow, another song with shadow in the title, is also very good. Also Fog to Fog. Now this album does kind of be a little bit top heavy, kind of fades a little bit in the back, which is why it fell to 23. But make no mistake, this is one of the best Amorphis albums in a long time. I guess it's almost impossible to have a list like this and not have a little bit of controversy. First hot take incoming. Coming in at number 22, Machine Head with their album Unatoned. And apparently, I need to have some atonement for putting them on the list. This is the 11th studio album from this California groove metal veteran band. This came out in April. Now, when this album came out, I remember even then people were on the internet just trashing this album, telling how awful it was. So, I'm always up for a good party. I went out to listen to it expecting a horrific car crash, and instead I came away going, wait a minute, this album's actually pretty good. If you like groove metal, this is your cup of tea. Lots of catchy tunes, lots of heavy riffs. What's not to like? So it got me to thinking, did I miss a cue somewhere? Is there something more going on? Is there, pictures, compromising pictures of Rob Flynn torturing kittens? Because it seems like there's something more going on here, internet community, because it seems like sometimes a band just gets a bad reputation and then everybody on the internet just piles on. So here's my take. If you haven't heard this album and you've avoided it because you think it's terrible, go give it a listen. Now, if you've genuinely listened to this album with a fair mind and said it's not for you, that's okay. But I think a lot of people have probably just avoided this album because of the bad publicity. If you're going to try this album, I start with my favorite song, Outsider. What a catchy tune. Again, I think this is one of the best songs of the year. But there's also good songs called Unbound, Bone Scraper. And like I said, consistently through the album, there's a lot of good stuff to listen to. One other thing that I thought was really cool. Before they released the album, before they went on tour, they put out a special single with the bands that they were going to go on tour with. So they put out a version of the single Scars Won't Define Us with their touring partners In Flames, Lacuna Coil, and Unearth. And I thought, what a cool idea. I hope more bands take their cues from Machine Head. It'd be great to have collaboration singles and videos where bands that are touring together make songs and do duets and whatnot. I think it's a really cool idea. Give Machine Head another try. Don't listen to all the haters on the internet. This album rocks. Coming in at number 21, Century, with their terrific album, Sign of the Storm. This album came out way back in January, making it one of the earliest albums on the list. And unlike many of the veteran bands we've been discussing up to this point, this is only Century's second studio album. Now, this band is a Swedish traditional heavy metal band, and they perfectly blend those Swedish melodies with the rawness of the new wave of British heavy metal. If you want a comparison, sure, it's a lazy comparison. They remind me a lot of 80s band, one of my favorites, 220 Volt. Now, this year, the traditional heavy metal field lacks that headliner. For instance, last year we had Judas Priest, we had Accept, we had Saxon, we had Riot, we had Bruce Dickinson. And again, we don't have that kind of a headliner this year, so you might think it's a bad year for traditional heavy metal. But this year, there's a lot of up-and-coming bands that are really bringing up the entire subgenre. So if you are missing your good traditional heavy metal, start right here with Sacrifice, one of the best traditional heavy metal albums of the year. Coming in at number 20, we have a tie. Now, before you say, wait a minute, you can't have ties, that's lame, let me give you the reasoning for this. Both of these bands have such a similar backstory. I thought I would lump them together. I think you'll see the reasons why here in a minute. The first band is a band called Sacrifice. They, back in February, put out an album called Volume 6. The band they tied with, Coroner, back in October, they put out a thrash metal album called Dissonance Theory. These two thrash bands and thrash metal albums are similar in a couple of reasons. Number one, both of these bands come from non-traditional thrash metal markets. Sacrifice comes from Canada. Definitely not the first country you think of when it comes to thrash. Coroner comes from Switzerland, even a less likely country to produce great thrash metal. The other thing that I found very interesting is that these bands have been on long hiatus. So for instance, Sacrifice has only put out 2 albums in the last 32 years. With, believe it or not, in 1993, they went 16 years before they put out another album, and then another 16 years before putting out the album in 2025. Not to be outdone, Coroner also put out a thrash metal album in 1993, but has not put out anything for that entirety of 32 years. It's just amazing to me that 2 bands, thrash metal bands from non-traditional markets, both put out albums in 1993, and after 32 years, they both put out new albums in 2025. An amazing story. Now, from the Sacrifice album, I think the absolute best track on there is Antidote of Poison. And from the Coroner album, I really like the song Renewal. Now, I have seen both of these bands placing really high on a lot of lists around the internet. Coroner, I've seen many people name that as their favorite album of the year across the board. So you need to check out these 2 great thrash metal albums. All right, no more ties, I promise. Coming in at 19, Disarmonia Mundi with their album Dormant Stranger. This came out in March. And after talking about the last 2 albums, this is going to sound very small indeed, but after a 10-year gap, I can't think of a better album title than The Dormant Stranger. This is their 6th album. Disarmonia Mundi is an Italian melodic death metal band. And really, I find this band really interesting in that they are a trio that really puts out a great sound. Some of my favorite tracks on these albums, Adrift Among Insignificant Strangers, Oathbreaker, and Crossroads to Eternity. This is one of my favorite melodic death metal albums of the year. Again, back in March, I was just assuming this was going to be a lock for the top 10, but it's been such a big year for death metal, big year for heavy metal across the board. This kind of got bumped down a little bit, but make no mistake, this is a great quality comeback album from Disarmonia Mundi. Coming in at number 18, Calva Louise with their excellent album, Edge of the Abyss. Calva Louise put out their 4th studio album back in July, and it is an absolute banger. Now, the thing is when you try to classify music, you try to put things into different buckets. Well, classify this one at your own risk, because Calva Louise puts together quite a variety of styles and backgrounds. For instance, their style, well, it's a little bit heavy metal. It's a little bit hip-hop. It's got some punk elements, and it definitely has a strong electronic beat background. They also come from various different cultures. Yes, this is an English band, but the members are from diverse places like Venezuela, France, and New Zealand. I think there's a 3-song stretch on this album that shows both the quality of their music and the diversity. It starts with the song Aimless, it goes to Loque Vele, and then finishes off with one of my favorite songs of the entire year, Impeccable. Let's face it, I can't describe this band. You're going to go have to listen to them yourself. Go out and listen to Calva Louise. You'll fall in love with them just like I did. Coming in at number 17, Benediction, with their new album, Ravage of Empires. This album came out in April, and it is some old school death metal here. This is the 10th studio album from Benediction, and they've never sounded better. I sometimes use the term banger a lot, but with this album, it is really appropriate. Their opening track is a song called A Carrion Harvest, and it kind of grabs you by the boo-boo, and this album does not let up. It does not let you go. Some of my favorite tracks, Engines of War, Crawling Over Corpses, but like I said, this album just keeps hitting you, and it does not ever lose any of that energy. So if you're looking for some good old death metal, check out Benediction, one of the best death metal albums of the year. Coming in at number 16, Epica, with their masterpiece, Asperal. This is their 9th studio album. They released it back in April. And if you're not familiar with Epica, they are a Dutch symphonic metal band. In my opinion, and it's not even close, they are the runaway winner for the best symphonic metal album of the year, and it's a runaway. The reason it wins, well, let's start with the first 2 songs. 2 absolute classics, Cross the Divide, and what I think is the best symphonic song of the year, Arcana. This album is so tight. I read an interview with the band where they were talking about how they all came together, put their egos aside, but I'm going to talk about some of the individual band members. Simone Simons has never sounded better. Mark Jansen's growls are sprinkled in, really giving it a lot of texture and a lot of heaviness. And the band really sounds tight. Their arrangements are epic, and they're just dripping with grandeur. Here's a good deep track off there, a song, Apparition. It's also one of the heaviest songs on the album. And the album closes with a beautiful, epic, inspirational ballad, the title track, Asperal. Overall, this is a symphonic masterpiece that you really need to check out. Coming in at number 15, Halestorm, with their brand new album, Everest. This is their 6th studio album. It was released back in August. If you're not familiar with Halestorm, they are an American hard rock heavy metal band. They are fronted by one of the best singers in the history of heavy metal, Lzzy Hale. She has a dynamic voice, and it sounds fantastic on this album. However, the reason that this album is kind of a return to form for them, yes, Lzzy Hale's voice is great, but the emotional impact of this album, Lizzy's songwriting takes a big step forward, and she talks about deep emotional issues, a lot of hurt, a lot of, lost love and betrayal. The other thing I really like about this album is the band sounds great. If I had a criticism of Halestorm in the past, it's that the song structure often was, modeled after pop music, which is really focused only on the singer. This time around, the band plays a big part, which gives it a raw sound and a big live feel. Now, if you're looking to try Halestorm, there's a good stretch of this album you should try. There's 3 songs in particular, Like a Woman Can, Rain Your Blood on Me, and Darkness Always Wins. All 3 of those songs are spectacular. Give them a listen, I think you'll agree. Coming in at number 14, Allegaeon with the Ossuary Lens. This is the 7th studio album from this Colorado death metal band. It was released back in April. I love this album. This is death metal, but it's a very heavy form of death metal. However, the very first track is a song called Refraction, which gives a kind of a forbearance of what you're going to find on this album, in that as heavy as it is going to have many moments where it's interlaced with this beautiful Spanish guitar. Heavy riffs and Spanish guitar, yes please. The best tracks on the album, the first single I heard, Driftwood, very good. But then, back to the Spanish guitars, there's a song called Imperial that might be my favorite track on the entire album. Also, Dark Matter Dynamics, featuring Adrian Belew, who is known for his fingering and Spanish guitar techniques. So if you like heavy, there's plenty here to like. If you like Spanish guitar, there's plenty here to like. Overall, one of the best death metal albums I've heard in a long time. Coming in at lucky number 13, Warbringer, with their terrific album, Wrath and Ruin. This is the 7th studio album from this California thrash metal band. It was released back in March. This album has a lot to talk about. The opening track is crusade metal at its very best. The sword and the cross mixes both the aggression and speed of thrash metal with the epicness that you would find in maybe symphonic metal or power metal. And they're just getting started. My favorite track on the entire album might be Strike from the Sky. Furious pace, great vocals. There's a couple other songs that I think also we should bring to your attention. One is Through a Glass Darkly, which might have the best riff on the entire album, and true to its title, is a little bit darker than the rest. And Cage of Air, which does one of my favorite tropes where it builds in tension up to a big climax. Is this the best thrash metal album of the year? It might be, or there might be one more on the list. You're going to have to stay tuned to find out. Coming in at number 12, Bleed From Within, with their masterpiece, Zenith. This Scottish powerhouse has put out 7 studio albums. This one was released back in April. And right now, I'm going to let you know, this is the runaway winner for Metalcore Album of the Year. There's so much to talk about on this album, but I'm going to go through a few songs in particular. In Place of Your Halo was put on the top songs of the year list for one simple reason. Bagpipes. I love when a band can infuse different instruments into heavy metal, and bagpipes is a difficult one to do, but when done right, it is mesmerizing. God Complex might be actually my favorite song, and definitely has my favorite riff on the entire album. And Hands of Sin. I was making the comment that on my list every year, Silosis seems to make it on there some way. Well, here Silosis combines with Bleed From Within to put together a pretty good song in and of itself. The title track is good, A Hope in Hell is good, and maybe the heaviest song on there, Chained to Hate. If you have not heard this album, you are doing yourself a disservice. Once again, Metalcore Album of the Year, right here, Zenith. Check it out. Warning, we have hit the part of this segment where you might hear a lot of mispronunciations. Coming in at number 11, Eluveitie, with their new album, Anv. This is the 9th studio album from this folk metal band, and it was released in April. Now, the fact that I mentioned that this is a folk metal band begs the question, do I like folk metal? And usually the answer is no. But Eluveitie, they have put together a formula that mixes in a heaviness and a death metal piece that comes in that makes this work sensational. The reason I usually don't like folk metal is it's usually not heavy enough. Eluveitie has solved that problem. Now, again, talking about several tracks on here. One, Fabian Ernie is the female lead singer of this band. She does one of the most sensational vocal performances of the year on the title track, Anv. It makes you want to go to Middle Earth. I don't know how else to say. This could have been in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's that beautiful. Now, arguably the best song on the album is The Prodigal Ones. That was the single that got me into this album. It is the perfect blend that I was speaking of earlier. Lots of folk elements, but also heavy. There's a deep track called The Harvest. All Is One is also very good. And I do like an epic closer, and The Prophecy fits that bill. All in all, this is a tremendous album, consistent from start to finish, with lots of highlights and a diverse style that I think will be one of your favorites as well. Coming in at number 10, Cradle of Filth, with The Screaming of the Valkyries. This album, the 14th studio album from this legendary English black metal band, came out in March. So I'm going through this list. I'm starting to realize March was a really good month. But I digress. Many of you are probably sitting on the list going, finally, a black metal album. I look at black metal very similar to the way I look at IPAs in the beer world. I love beer. I'm not a big fan of IPAs, but it seems like the entire world loves IPAs. Same thing holds true. I love metal, but it seems like a lot more people love black metal than I do. And one of the reasons I don't like black metal is because it's usually not very catchy, doesn't have great rhythms. Well, Screaming of the Valkyries definitely changes this. This black metal album, dare I say, is catchy. Now, there are several songs I want to talk about. The opening track is a wildly titled To Live Deliciously, and it's just as weird and good as it sounds. Demagoguery follows that up. Again, another big, heavy, catchy track, Malignant Perfection. But my favorite, and one of the best songs of the year, is White Hellebore. And I'll tell you, one of the things I really like about this song in particular is it kind of takes that black metal and brings it into like a symphonic, classical style. They bring in this Zoe Marie Fedorov to do the female vocals along with Danny Filth, and their two voices blend beautifully. I don't always like my black metal, but when I do, I like it catchy. And this is both of those things. Is it the best black metal album? There might be one more. You'll have to stay for the rest of the list to find out. Coming in at number 9, The Halo Effect with March of the Unheard. The Halo Effect is a Swedish melodic death metal band that could be described as the In Flames alumni group. This is their second studio album, and it is terrific. It came out, I think, like the first week of January. It was kind of amazing in that this is one of those albums that I had heard the singles from way back in 2024 and was eagerly waiting for the calendar to turn so this bad boy would come out. It has been on the top of my list ever since. One of the best albums of the year and one of the first albums of the year. Love this, love this. Now, one of the things that I have mentioned in other venues is this band is, of course, fronted by Michael Stanny, who also is, in his main band, I would say, the lead singer for Dark Tranquillity. They made Best Album and Best Songs list of last year. He also last year was in a gothic metal group called Cemetery Skyline, who also made Best Song of the Year list. And so I was already getting pumped up when they started releasing singles for this. One of the hardest working men in show business, I tell you. Now, the title track of this is great, but there's also a couple of other faster, heavier tracks, Detonate and The Burning Point, that you need to check out. Overall, if you like melodic death metal, if you're a big fan of In Flames, you need to check this out. Check out the Halo Effect. Coming in at number 8, Testament, with their brand new album, Parabellum. This is a triumphant return from Testament after a 5-year absence. This is one of my favorite thrash metal bands of all time. This is their 14th studio album, and it came out in October. Ladies and gentlemen, I did not think that there would be a thrash metal album that could top Warbringer, but this is it. I believe this is the best thrash metal album of the year, in a year where thrash metal had some of the best albums and songs in a long time. A real comeback year overall for the thrash metal movement. Now, one of the best songs on this album, and the one that made my top list for top 25 heavy metal songs, I love Infanticide AI. We need to talk about this artificial intelligence because it's the stuff of nightmares, and apparently it is upon us. A very timely topic. Shadow People, also very good. There is a ballad on here called Meant to Be, and I'm amazed. Chuck Billy's voice sounds just as good as when he was putting out ballads in the late 80s, maybe even better. Love his voice on this. This is a really well done ballad. Now, if you like traditional metal, there's another song in here that I love, Nature of the Beast. And finally, Room 117. This album has a lot of thrash. It has, again, some ballads, some heavy metal, even some black metal elements to this. It is an absolute showcase of Testament's versatility and talent. Coming in at number 7, Rivers of Nihil, with their new album, Rivers of Nihil. This is the 5th studio album from this progressive death metal band, and it came out in May. Now, if you have not been following the story of Rivers of Nihil, they had, shall we say, some tensions within the band, some creative differences. So they had a major shakeup, and the results are in. While before I liked Rivers of Nihil and thought they were a very good band, now I love this band. And I think they are an even better band. And the reason is simple. Like chemistry majors, they have struck the perfect balance between heaviness and melody, and even mixed in some horns. Remember what I said about bagpipes? Same thing holds true for saxophones. Putting different instruments into metal, always appreciated. There are 3 songs on this album in particular. The whole album's good. But 3 songs that I considered for my top 25 heavy metal songs of the year. The first, Water in Time, very good. The second might be my favorite. House of Light is fantastic. And finally, American Death. You have got, if you want to give them a try, at least try those 3 songs and you'll come away impressed. I guarantee it. Coming in at number 6, Deftones with Private Music. This is the 10th studio album from these alternative metal icons, and it was released back in August. Now, one of the running themes we've had throughout this list is triumphant returns, and once again, the Deftones make a triumphant return after 5 years. And quite frankly, Private Music is one of their best albums in a long time. And one of those reasons is this. The production on this album is off the charts good. We don't often talk about production. Not a lot of attention is focused on that, but sometimes you get the right producer to create just the right sound. And my favorite Deftones album prior to this was an album called Koi no Yoken. I always call it the Koi Pond album, but that was my favorite album for many, many years. And because it was very well produced. So what do the Deftones do? They go back to that producer. The results? Chino's voice sounds terrific. One of the most underrated singers going. Steven's guitar sound great. Abe's drum sounds great. It really brings out the Deftones sound. It really pops. Go out and listen to this. One of the best songs of the year, Milk of the Madonna, is on my top 25 songs of the year list. But this whole album is good. Pay particular attention to the crisp sound on this album. The Grammys often have a category called Record of the Year for Best Produced Album. I'm going right here. The Best Produced Album of 2025. Coming in at number 5 is Messa with The Spin. This is the 4th studio album from this, I guess you could call them, doom metal band. Now, the reason I say I guess you could classify them as a doom metal band is because this band is so much more than that. They have so many complex styles and layers to their music. It's almost impossible to classify them. Let's go through just a few tracks so you can see what I mean. The first song on the album is called Void Meridian, and it will transport you back to the 80s, to what I would call the skinny tie era of music. Cool synthesizers that are a real throwback. But that's followed up with a song called At Races, which is slow and doomy and smoldering. And then that's followed up with my favorite song, Fire on the Roof, which is a song that builds that tension up and then erupts into a lethal guitar solo, much more faster paced than the previous song. Dress breaks down into like you're transported into a jazz nightclub complete with jazzy horns. And finally, Reveal brings you on like a nighttime serenade out on the bayou, very bluesy with heavy distorted riffs. When you start talking about these top 5 albums, you're talking about the upper echelon. This could be number 1 easily. You need to check this out because it's almost impossible to describe, but trust me, you want to listen to this and savor this. This album is a real grower. Coming in at number 4 is Blackbraid 3. I guess you can guess, the 3rd studio album from this black metal outfit. It was released back in August. It is atmospheric black metal at its finest. Now, back in 2023, when I made my first list here on the channel, Blackbraid 2 was in contention to make the list and just missed out. So with Blackbraid 3, they left no doubt and got all the way up into my top 5. Now, this album has a cool concept. It swings back and forth between these musical interludes and songs. It has tremendous atmosphere that makes you immerses yourself into being in a forest at night. And it incorporates a lot of Native American styles and musical instruments. Now, my favorite musical interlude on here is called Traversing the Forest of Eternal Dusk. That's a mouthful. My favorite song on this album is The Dying Breath of a Sacred Stag. But it also has some really cool epic songs towards the back end of the album. My favorite, And He Became the Burning Stars. So for those of you, again, that were like, where's all the black metal? Here it is. And let me just say, Runaway Black Metal Album of the Year, Blackbraid 3. You must check this out. It is a masterpiece. With a heavy heart and a tear in my eye, I announce the 3rd album, coming in at number 3, Arch Enemy with Blood Dynasty. This is the 12th studio album from Swedish melodic death band, and it was released back in March. It's also the 4th album that they did with their newer lead singer, Alyssa White-Gluz. And why is there a tear in my eye? Because it apparently is the last album they're going to do with Alyssa. It was just announced a few days ago that they have parted company. They've split up. Alyssa appears to be headed for a solo project. Now, the good news is Arch Enemy has announced that they have big plans for 2026 regardless, so they're looking to get a new singer. I really do sincerely hope both bands do well. This was, for the majority of the year, this album I assumed would be my number one album of the year. Again, it was released back in March and spent the majority of the year as my number one album. But a couple albums, I guess you could maybe start guessing who number 2 and number 1 are, came in a little bit later in the year and just bumped them out slightly. But again, we're in that upper echelon now. All of these albums are fantastic. This album has so many great singles. Dream Stealer, very good. March of the Miscreants. You want to talk about some great vocals. The title track is good. But my two favorites, Liars and Thieves and Paper Tiger. If you have not heard Arch Enemy, at least go and check out those last two songs and you will become a fan. But for what it's worth, because they are, at the moment, no more. Back in March, Arch Enemy was the king of the hill, and that lasted until September. Coming in at number 2, Paradise Lost with this album, Ascension. Oh boy, is this a great album. This is the 17th studio album. This is the most prolific band on the list. A couple of bands came in with like 16, 15, 17 studio albums from Paradise Lost. Again, one of these bands that goes all the way back into the 80s and 90s. This is the Gothic Metal Album of the Year. It is great from start to finish. So many great tracks to talk about. Tyrant Serenade, Silence Like a Grave, Lay a Wreath Upon the World. But there's some deep tracks. Like, those are the big heavy hitters. Silence Like the Grave, that was the single they put out to promote this. It is fantastic. But a couple of deep tracks I want you to also pay attention to, Diluvium and Sirens. But like I say, overall, you go from start to finish, this is a unbelievably good album. And now I think, well, this is going to end up being the album of the year, but yet another album was going to come and bump them off the top of the hill. Drum roll, please. The number 1 heavy metal album of 2025, Orbit Culture, Death Above Life. This is the 5th studio album from this Swedish melodic death metal band, and it was released in October. Congratulations to Orbit Culture. I cannot tell you how much I love this album. Now, there was some signs that I was going to love this album. Many of the singles ended up being really good tracks, and so the anticipation was building and building. But it did not prepare me for how blown away I was by this album. It starts off with a great opening track. For those of you who follow the channel, you know I love a good barn burner to start things out. Inferna is so heavy. Now, I personally like a song called Inside the Waves. It comes a couple of songs later. It's got some of the best vocals of the year. So much emotion. Really like the way Orbit Culture can mix in the clean vocals and the dirty vocals, and they do it perfectly on this song. The Tales of War, in my top 25 songs of the year. Hydra, in my top 25 songs of the year. The production on those two, the heavy riffs and the almost blasts of sonic thunder that come out of Hydra, unbelievable. Nerve is also very good. The title track has a haunting beauty to it. And finally, The Storm really shows off their power and aggression. I can go on, and I often do. But let's just leave it here. I believe not only is this the best heavy metal album of the year, but it is in succession of all these other great, they put out a great album in 2023. They were in my top 5 metal albums back in 2023. They put out an EP between these two great studio albums that was the best EP of 2023. All in all, I think we can declare Orbit Culture the new kings of metal. They are the biggest, hottest thing going today. You must check them out. Whew, we made it. There they are, the top 25 heavy metal albums of the year. Now, as I spoke about earlier in the video, this is where I want to hear from you. You tell me your top albums of the year. I love hearing from you, and I love being informed of all the bands that I probably missed. Now, the reason is simple. In February, we all know that the Grammys suck, and we all know that the Grammys are not going to give metal its due. So I have my own Metal Dude Award show that happens the Tuesday after the big Grammy Awards. So you have a whole month and a half to convince me that your band belongs at the top. Also, subscribe to the channel so you can be alerted to all the content. We're going to have lots of specials coming up to the big Metal Dude Award show. And we're going to be back in our series, going back in time into the 80s and 90s, telling you the best heavy metal from those years. Plus, we do an occasional album review and keep you up to date on all the new music that's coming out. In the meantime, this is the Metal Dude signing off. Have a wonderful 2025, and I will see you back here in 2026.